Oh, everybody, just I know you're not going to be able to unmute, but yeah, gosh, what a gift. What a gift. All right, we're going to have another video just for something a little different, right? Okay, then. So that was from quite a few years ago, but how many people can relate to Bobby, right?
Here we go.
This is not just
Oops.
another streaming app. This is
It's not just another streaming app. So many of us have been there, right? Someone asks us what church we attend or what faith community we belong to. And in that instant, you have to admit you have this tiny little bit of a panic, right? How's this going to go? And we take a breath and we say, well, I'm a member or I'm part of the Unitarian Universalist congregation. And then we brace ourselves. Are they going to ask a question? Oh, I've never heard of that. What is Unitarian Universalism? They say, is that a Christian denomination? And there it is, the question. What is Unitarian Universalism? And our minds race thinking, how much time do I have? How deep am I going to go? If I tell them the first principle, the one I remember, will they ask me about the other ones too? If this has happened to you, you're not alone. And unlike Colbert, who so eloquently memorized the Nicene Creed and was able to rattle it off, summarizing his faith beliefs, Unitarian Universalism does not provide such a go-to statement. Now, sure, there are web pages full of elevator speeches you could use, but my guess is that you will not find one that is perfect for you. Not because there's not some really well-written ones, because there are, but because even the well-written ones, they're missing a key component. They're missing your personal experience. Now, you know, advertisers, they know well that no one is going to buy a product based just on a list of attributes alone, right? I remember so clearly when my youngest was 6. So her entire life up until that point, we did not have television. So she had never seen a commercial. And then one day we decided to try turning on cable. So soon afterwards, I'm in my bedroom folding laundry when my little 6-year-old comes in holding her back. And she says, Mommy, my back hurts. I'm like, oh, goodness. I said, well where does it hurt? So without being more specific, she kind of points and she asks, what kind of mattress do we have? And I pause suspiciously. You know, she continues, a thermopedic mattress provides the best back support. I think we need one of those. Oh, we do we? And then a few days later, when she heard me discussing toothpaste options with my husband, she chimed in, but Mom, now you don't have to choose between cleaning and whitening. Crest does both. We unplugged the cable the next day. The advertisers had not just given my daughter a list of why their product was best. They had created these little mini movies complete with this emotional arc. And she was right there with them, right? Now, the capitalistic, consumerism-driven challenges with these commercials aside, I do think we can learn something from the psychology of advertising. So think about how you describe Unitarian Universalism. Right? Do you sometimes offer the principles as a sort of, I don't know, ingredient list? Right? Well, we have a good part of inherent worth and dignity and some free and responsible search for truth and meaning and a little side of justice and a little dollop of the web of interconnectedness to top it all off. Right? It's not very appealing, really. But I do know that many of us do turn to the 7 principles, or at least 2 or 3 of them, for a sort of cheat sheet when we are faced with that question of what is Unitarian Universalism. The problem with this tactic is, well, for one thing, the principles can sound so general that the questioner is often left wondering how it is that a set of moral codes constitutes a religion at all. And then for another, stating the principles really tells nothing of how this faith and how they have touched you, have changed you, and could potentially touch and change another. Dana Greeley, who was a former Unitarian Universalist president, put it this way when he said, the principles and sources describe a process for approaching the religious depths. but they testify to no immediate acquaintance with the depths themselves. It's in getting to those depths, having an experience of the principles actually working in our lives, that's the juicy part. And if we do that, not only can we better inspire others about this faith, but we give ourselves a much richer relationship with it as well. So where are the depths of Unitarian Universalism? Well, in her novel, Fly Away Home, Marge Piercy has the narrator, who's a mother, say to her daughters, she says, "We raised the girls Unitarian, which seemed a nice, sensible compromise between having no religion at all and having to lie about what we believe. Enough religion to be respectable, but not enough to get in the way." Well, that's one answer we could use, right? Oh, Unitarian Universalism, it's just enough religion to be respectable, but not enough to get in the way. Well, with all due respect to the character in Piercy's book, I actually have to disagree with her assessment. Because I think the depth point of Unitarian Universalism is that it does seek to get in our way. In fact, if really embraced, Unitarian Universalism gets so up in our business, that's what the young people put it these days, right? It gets so up in our business that it requires us to encounter it over and over again in every aspect of our lives. The interesting part is not what the principles of Unitarian Universalism say, but how we live them. So questions for you. How has being part of this community impacted your ability to honor others' inherent worth and dignity? How were you personally called to respond to the death of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and so many other people of color because of your commitment to justice and equity and compassion in human relations? How have you personally grown in understanding about issues of oppression, about white supremacy, because of this free and responsible search for truth and meaning that the principles promote? Have you deepened your spirituality as a result of the acceptance of one another and encouragement for spiritual growth? And I wonder how knowing that you are part of an interconnected web of existence comforts you in hard times. To borrow from our choir song, the question is, why is it that you sing? So compare telling someone about the list of the 7 principles to describe the faith. Compare that to just a description of how your life looks because of your connection to a group of people practicing those principles. Now, notice I didn't say living them perfectly, but just practicing them, right? We come together to practice. We come together because the idea of beloved community is a practice. And if we can't create a little sample beloved community here, I wonder if there's any hope of it being created in a wider world. You know, many of us found our way to Unitarian Universalism by a series of serendipitous acts. I hear stories all the time. For me, it was that there just so happened to be a Unitarian Universalist congregation across from my daughter's college, and one day she decided to check them out and call and tell me about it. It's kind of funny, though, and not funny, when you consider that there were 2 other small congregations within 20 minutes of our home, and one very large one about 45 minutes away, and yet I had never heard about Unitarian Universalism when my kids were young. And I didn't find out till much later that some of my friends actually went to one of the Unitarian Universalist congregations. They just had never mentioned it in conversation. I've heard from more than one person here say how they wished they had found Unitarian Universalism sooner in their life. Maybe you're one of those. And I hear it all the time, how important this community is to you. How even if you do not attend regularly, how grateful you are to know that there is a religious community like this right here in Marietta. And yet I'm going to challenge you. When was the last time you invited someone to join you here? an acquaintance, a friend, someone you meet in a shop. Now, I know sometimes it's the assumptions we make about others that keep us from talking about Unitarian Universalism. And it happened to me soon after I arrived here. I wandered into an antique shop in downtown Woodstock, and the person at the counter could be described as kind of a burly gentleman with what may be described as a Western cowboy motif going on with his attire, right? And I found myself beginning to make assumptions right away in my mind about what his religious and political affiliations may be, deeming that we would probably have little in common. Well, as I was paying for my brass teapot that I'd fallen in love with, we got to talking. And it's often the case when I mention I'm newly transplanted to the area, I'm asked why I came. I took a breath and I said, well, I'm the minister at the Unitarian Universalist congregation on Canton Road. And I braced myself for his reply. But then this burly shopkeeper got a big smile and he laughed. He said, oh, I got married in a Unitarian church up in Maine. I like those Unitarians. Good people, he said. Yes, I agreed. Good people. And we talked about these good people and both of our experiences with them. Of course, I invited him to visit us, and maybe one day he will. But I'll have to admit that I left there feeling a little ashamed of how quickly my mind had assumed that this person would not be interested in Unitarian Universalism. And I wonder if that's ever happened to you. How many times do you quickly make an assumption that this faith community that means so much to you would not also be an interest to somebody else? You know, of course, not everyone will take you up on the offer to visit here, but we don't know if we don't try. And to get ready for those moments, instead of working on crafting an informative elevator speech about what Unitarian Universalism is, I invite you to really reflect on and be prepared to share what Unitarian Universalism and Emerson means to you and how it has changed you. How is it the Tempur-Pedic to your sore back, metaphorically speaking? I'm going to close with a sweet story from Anne Lamott from her book, Traveling Mercies.
Junior youth crossing paths 11 colon 16 812 colon 15 P. Starts in 30 minutes.
Seems like we have an unmuted person, Ray. Let's just pause for a second so we take care of that. So here's the story from Anne Lamott. She tells the story of her son, Sam, who was one day found himself lost in his Northern California neighborhood, and he couldn't recognize anything familiar, no landmarks, no people, nothing could help him get home. So he walked around and he was getting anxious and he began to cry, and a police car happened to drive by and saw Sam, and the officers got out and talked to him and asked him where he lived, but he couldn't say. He couldn't remember his address or even guess at what direction it was. So the officers offered to drive him around until he saw something familiar. And so for a long time they drove around, and Sam was in the back seat getting worried, looking out the window, tears down his face, block after block. And then they happened to drive by a little corner with a small white building with tall windows and big wooden doors that were open. And Sam's eyes got really large and his mouth fell open and he leapt to attention and he shrieked and he pointed, stop the car, stop the car. You can let me out here. That is my church. I can find my way home from here. That is my church. I can find my way home from here. I know it would not really answer the question of what Unitarian Universalism is to the satisfaction of some, but I like that definition. Unitarian Universalism is the religion from where I can find my way home. And it's a place that feels like I am not alone on my journey. Everyone is on a journey, and I am confident there are many people who, because of their identity